Some of the hardest news stories to hear are the ones involving family. Most of us know our families are there when we need them. Unfortunately, that's not always the case. A man in Hialeah, Florida, was apprehended for the stabbing of his own brother-in-law. He has a lengthy history with law enforcement. Police were called to a home in the 2300 block of West 53rd Place in Hialeah at 1:16 a.m. and discovered a woman in distress next to her husband lying prone on the kitchen floor. The woman explained to the police that she was upstairs asleep when she heard her husband scream from below. She rushed down the stairs to find him lying on the floor with several stab injuries. Her brother, Jesus Hernandez, ran out the back door. In the days before, Hernandez had shown up at his sister's house uninvited several times to make demands and cause problems. Witnesses reported that he was seen outside the home screaming and cursing on several occasions and often made threats of harm. He was told never to return to the home by his brother-in-law and sister, a demand that made Hernandez furious. He left, but not without promising to return to harm his brother-in-law. Police dispatched a search team with helicopters, eager to find Hernandez, who was possibly still armed and dangerous.
That's outside of the Holiday Inn, off the Palmetto and 103rd Street.
They found Hernandez hiding in a dumpster near a Holiday Inn a few hours later. Police say he snuck into his sister's townhouse through an unlocked sliding glass door. He was arrested and charged with first-degree homicide and is currently awaiting trial. Robert Shia was sentenced to 5 life terms in Australia for causing the horrendous death of his brother-in-law and his entire family in 2017. Police theorized that Robert felt shamed by his wife, Kathy's brother, Norman Lin, when he could not find a job upon moving to Australia and took the lives of his own family to save face. In China, Robert was a successful ear, nose, and throat specialist. After moving to Australia, he and Kathy opened a business, but it failed. They moved closer to Kathy's family, who never failed to mention to the unemployed Robert what a massive success Norman was turning out to be. Norman was married to Yun Lee Lily Lin. They had 2 sons, Henry and Terry, and a daughter, Brenda. The couple owned a highly regarded newsstand in the area. One morning, Kathy Shia found herself receiving phone call after phone call from curious customers asking why her brother's newsstand had not opened that day. When they couldn't be reached by phone, Kathy and Robert decided to go to their home to check on them. The front was unlocked when they arrived, and Kathy immediately felt something was wrong. She decided to look through the house, and that's when she found the remains of her brother, his wife, and sons, and his wife's sister, Yun Bin Irene Lin. Each in a different room and Norman hid by a duvet. The family had such horrendous injuries, their facial features were unrecognizable. Coroners suspected a tool, such as a hammer, was used to bludgeon the family. The remains of Henry and Terry showed signs of defensive maneuvers, leading police to believe they were targeted after their parents. Irene had been last. Kathy called the police to the scene. She begged Robert to stay with her, but he insisted on picking up his in-laws to tell them the bad news. When police arrived, they noticed an interesting clue. The electricity to the home had been disconnected. The intrusion had been conducted in total darkness. This meant the perpetrator was familiar with the layout of the house and likely known to the family. Another indicator that the culprit was someone familiar with the house was that there were no signs of a break-in. The door had been opened with a key. More than 20 shoe prints were found in the carpeting throughout the house. They belonged to a men's size ASICS sneaker, and the size was determined to be between 8 and 10. Strangely, nothing was missing from the house, which eliminated the theory that this was a burglary gone wrong. Norman and Lily's daughter, Brenda, had gone away for school for a few days before the tragic event. She heard about her family's demise from a Facebook post and rushed home. She moved in with Robert and Kathy and had no idea her Uncle Robert was the main person of interest. Police thought it unusual that Robert left his wife alone at the scene of the crime. He seemed unconcerned that the culprit could be nearby. Police believe that before he went to retrieve his in-laws, he got rid of the evidence. Another reason police began to pay closer attention to Robert was the shoe prints found at the scene. Robert owned a pair of shoes that fit the description. Soon, the most disturbing motive of all was revealed. Several years earlier, Brenda had made accusations against Robert of inappropriate conduct, but no charges had ever been filed. Police believe Robert did away with her family as a way to ensure she lived under his roof. It was discovered that Robert had cleaned out his garage the morning after the tragedy. Police searched and found a droplet containing DNA relevant to the case. He was apprehended and charged with the attacks on the Lynn family.
This morning, police arrested Mr. Lynn's brother-in-law at a house near the crime scene in Sydney's northwest.
He had 4 trials with several delays lasting years. Everyone in his family turned against him except his wife, Kathy, even after Brenda came forward to say he had been inappropriate with her while she stayed with them. Kathy insisted Robert would never hurt her family and that he loved them as his own. She swore in court that he was asleep next to her the entire night that the Lynn family attacks took place. Police believe that Robert gave Kathy some type of sleeping medication to make sure he could leave the house without her being aware. Robert's defense was that no one could complete such a task alone. But he was found responsible for the attacks and received 5 life sentences. Becky Watts met a similar fate at the hands of a relative. Becky went to live with her father in the city of Bristol, England after her parents divorced. He lived with his girlfriend Angie, who had a son, Nathan Matthews, who was in his mid-20s. Nathan had a sketchy history with law enforcement and also carried on a strange relationship with his girlfriend Shauna Huar. They met when she was 14 and he was in his early 20s. One afternoon, Becky left the house and didn't return. Angie was at a doctor's appointment. Nathan and Shauna were in the back of the house. When police arrived to take a missing persons report, they said they had heard the door slam but didn't see Becky leave.
Shauna heard the door go, so she was assuming it was Becky going out.
Police began the investigation by interviewing family members. Nathan and Shauna dodged police and avoided interviews, a maneuver that immediately made police suspicious. When police finally got them into the station for an interview, they found their stories sounded rehearsed. As police investigated the scene of Becky's disappearance, they found a smear of DNA on her bedroom wall that contained a fingerprint. A fingerprint the lab soon revealed belonged to Nathan. Police seized the couple's cell phones where they found texts between them about snatching and attacking teen girls. Eventually, Nathan confessed. He said he planned to scare Becky for being a snotty brat. He was going to tie her up and give her a lecture about her attitude. Instead, he accidentally strangled her. He and Shauna then cut her up and placed the pieces in an ice chest. They took it to a remote location and hid it underground. Shauna said she had nothing to do with any of it. She said her scary text message exchange was only fun and games, and she was just being sarcastic. A jury trial found them both responsible for Becky's death. Nathan received a life sentence, eligible for parole after 33 years. Shauna received a term of 17 years behind bars. A memorial bench was constructed in Becky's name in a field close to her home. Her father wrote a memoir about his life raising her and what happened to her, called Becky, The Heartbreaking Story of Becky Watts. Nathan and Shauna filed appeals against their sentences, but the Court of Appeal rejected their application, stating there was no reasonable argument that the convictions are unsafe or that the sentences were wrong in principle or manifestly excessive. Some families are closer than others. In these cases, blood definitely wasn't thicker than water. What do you think of these bad brothers, twisted sisters, and unruly relations? Leave your comments below and don't forget to give us a thumbs up and subscribe to get fresh content weekly.